On September 12, 2025, astronomers witnessed something they were not prepared for. It came blazing in from the darkness of deep space, so bright and so enormous that it lit up amateur telescopes across continents. Its tail stretched across the sky, 5 times the width of a full moon, a glowing river of light sweeping across the heavens. Within hours, observatories confirmed what everyone already suspected. This wasn't a normal comet. It wasn't even close. It was larger, brighter, and stranger than anything ever documented in modern astronomy. Its official designation was C/2025 R2, but scientists quickly gave it a different name: Swan. What truly shook the scientific community wasn't just Swan's size or its unnatural luminosity, it was the timing, because Swan was not arriving alone. Another object, already infamous, already unexplainable, already rewriting textbooks, was inbound from the exact opposite side of the sky. 3I/ATLAS was racing toward the sun on a hyperbolic trajectory, an interstellar visitor exhibiting behaviors no comet had ever shown. And somehow, impossibly, both objects were scheduled to reach their closest approach to the sun within the same 10-day window. 2 anomalies, 2 different origins, 2 converging paths, and both passing behind the sun during the exact days when Earth's telescopes would be blinded by its glare. Statistically, it wasn't just unlikely, it was impossible. Some astronomers stopped calling it coincidence and began whispering a different word: mission. From the moment Swan's data began pouring in, its strangeness was unmistakable. Normal comets scatter light chaotically, their surfaces composed of ice, dust, and rock that reflect sunlight in uneven bursts. Swan didn't behave like that. Its reflectivity carried metallic signatures: nickel, cobalt, the same elements humans use to forge durable alloys. Whenever solar wind struck its surface, it didn't fracture or erupt. It remained stable, shielded, almost armored. Some researchers began calling it the Fortress, a colossal object that didn't just survive the sun's wrath, but seemed built to endure it. Its brightness curve remained far beyond anything ice or rock could produce, and the tail, if it even was a tail, didn't drift like vapor. It pulsed. Subtle rhythmic changes traveled down its length, like controlled microthrusts guiding its movement through space. It was like watching a skyscraper-sized vessel drifting through the solar wind with deliberate adjustments cloaked in a shimmering halo that might not be gas at all, but an electromagnetic shield protecting it from solar radiation. Even more unsettling was the dynamic between Swan and its smaller counterpart. While Swan loomed as a fortress, massive and unyielding, 3I/ATLAS moved like a drone, agile, erratic, and capable of acceleration bursts no natural process could explain. Color shifts, tail reversals, thermal regulation, rhythmic radio pulses. One looked like the mothership, the other like a scout. Plotting their arrival trajectories produced a cosmic map that looked less like randomness and more like choreography. Swan came from Aquarius, Atlas from Sagittarius, 2 directions separated by a quarter of the entire sky. Yet despite these radically different approach angles, both crossed into the inner solar system at nearly the same heliocentric distance. Their perihelions were separated by merely 3 days. For natural comets, this kind of synchrony does not happen. Interstellar objects arrive centuries apart, often thousands. But here were 2 of the strangest objects ever recorded, entering the same narrow solar corridor at the same time. And then came the blackout. From October 8th to October 18th, the sun's glare rendered our instruments blind. During those 10 days, neither Swan nor Atlas could be directly observed. That blackout window aligned almost perfectly with both of their closest approaches, not just to the sun, but to each other. Some astronomers saw it as the most extraordinary coincidence in the history of observation. Others saw it as coordination, a rendezvous designed to happen where we could not watch. The deeper scientists dug, the worse the numbers became. Atlas had already shown anomalous acceleration events requiring energy outputs equivalent to 10 nuclear power plants. But Swan's energy levels dwarfed that. Its luminosity implied output close to 10,000 gigawatts, more power than the entire electrical grid of Earth combined. No natural comet could sustain that comet's sublimate ice. Asteroids reflect light, but nothing maintains that kind of constant power without disintegrating under its own heat. Some theorists propose that Swan was actively harvesting solar energy using the sun as a massive power source. Others suggested that its giant metallic hull could be converting radiation into propulsion or communication. A few quietly argued it might not be a comet at all, but a fortress-like construct traveling across interstellar distances, and its enormous luminous tail wasn't vapor. It was plasma, a controlled emission used to steer or signal. This wouldn't have been alarming on its own, but the timing of its pulses matched a pattern, regular enough to resemble a signal, structured enough to imply communication, consistent enough that some began calling Swan not a fortress, but a beacon. If Atlas was a drone collecting data, Swan could be the archive or transmitter. The intelligence behind both remained a mystery, but their synchronized arrival suggested intent. One small and maneuverable, one massive and shielded, two pieces of something larger, two parts of a system that had chosen the same corridor at the same time, hidden from us by the single blind spot in Earth's observational capabilities. Government silence only deepened suspicion. NASA, ESA, and other agencies restricted data releases precisely during the days when Swan and ATLAS were closest. Live tracking feeds went offline. High-resolution images were withheld. Requests for raw data were denied. Officials cited solar conjunction downtime, but internal leaks suggested otherwise. Explicit orders for silence, redactions across data logs, observatory teams reassigned without explanation. The blackout was not just natural, it was enforced. Independent astronomers filled the void. Backyard telescope networks in Europe, South America, and Asia shared encrypted data, trying to capture even fragments of information. Their conclusion was simple. Something unprecedented was happening. Something the public was not being shown. And as all eyes focused on Swan, new anomalies kept emerging. Its tail pulses synchronized with shifts in ATLAS's glow. Its microthrusts matched the timing of ATLAS's acceleration bursts. Two objects, two trajectories, one pattern. By the time the blackout ended, one realization had begun spreading across the scientific world. A realization more unsettling than anything seen before. Swan and 3I/ATLAS were not behaving like wanderers from different stars. They were behaving like two components of the same mission, and whatever mission they belonged to was now unfolding inside our solar system. As astronomers continued tracking Atlas, the smaller object behaved in a way no natural body ever had. Its tail didn't just brighten, it shifted, pulsed, and changed colors as if responding to internal commands. Over several weeks, 3 sudden accelerations were recorded, each one sharp, evenly spaced, and perfectly timed, as if the object fired invisible thrusters. Every burst required energy equivalent to 10 nuclear power plants. No comet has ever produced that kind of power. Natural outgassing is chaotic and messy, driven by uneven heating, but the changes in Atlas were abrupt, rhythmic, controlled. They looked engineered. Meanwhile, Swan, the colossal object, mirrored this behavior at an incomprehensible scale. Its massive tail pulsed as well, but not with the irregular flicker of sunlight scattering through dust. The pulses were structured, measured. They nudged the enormous body with delicate precision, like micro-adjustments made by a ship correcting its course. One object small and agile, the other vast and impenetrable, yet both moving with a strange harmony. As if connected through a set of instructions older than our technology, scientists tried to dismiss the possibility. Coincidence, they said. Misinterpreted data. Instrument error. But the numbers kept aligning Swan and Atlas, despite arriving from 2 completely different directions in the galaxy, had synchronized behavior. Their thrusts weren't random. They appeared to be linked, and then came the orbital revelation that stunned even the most skeptical researchers. When astronomers mapped the 2 trajectories together, something extraordinary appeared. Swan and Atlas, though separated by millions of kilometers, lined up to occupy the same narrow corridor around the Sun. Their perihelion distances, those closest approaches, were only 50 million kilometers apart, a gap smaller than the distance between Earth and Mars. Their timings, within 3 days. Their arrival vectors, converging on the same region of space during the one period when our instruments would be blind. For scientists who study orbital mechanics, randomness is the foundation of prediction. But here, randomness broke down. two anomalies entering the inner solar system at the same time, threading the same corridor, both hidden behind the sun during the exact days we couldn't watch. It didn't resemble chaos. It resembled choreography. As one planetary dynamicist finally admitted, "This doesn't look natural. This looks engineered." When energy calculations were updated, disbelief turned into something closer to fear. A TLAS's bursts already defied conventional physics, but Swan's numbers made Atlas look insignificant. Swan's sustained luminosity suggested an energy output of 10,000 gigawatts, more than Earth's entire power grid. For a natural comet to maintain that without vaporizing itself would require physics that does not exist. Theories emerged in the shadows of research labs. Some scientists believe Swan's metallic surface was capturing solar radiation, converting it into propulsion or power storage. Others proposed it wasn't a comet at all, but a colossal construct, possibly dormant for millennia, now reactivated by proximity to the sun. Some whispered that its tail wasn't a byproduct of vaporizing ice, but a plasma shield deflecting solar radiation. And the boldest theorists said the quiet part aloud. This looked like technology. As these discussions grew louder behind closed doors, the timing of Swan's pulses began to raise alarms. They weren't random. They weren't chaotic. They were too regular, too structured. Enough so that some researchers began interpreting them as signals, data packets hidden within bursts of light and energy. If Atlas was acting like a drone, maneuverable, reactive, then Swan might be its command ship, broadcasting information across the void. A beacon, or worse, a transmitter. But just as the scientific community began preparing to confront these implications, silence fell. Agencies that had been releasing daily updates suddenly stopped NASA-restricted access to higher-resolution radar data. ESA temporarily suspended public logs from their solar trackers. ISRO shut down archival downloads for several days. The explanations were vague: solar conjunction, system maintenance, procedural review. But leaks told a different story. Internal documents showed orders to withhold data during the critical window researchers were reassigned. Proposals for alternative telescope angles were denied. FOIA requests were returned nearly fully redacted. The blackout wasn't limited to spacecraft telemetry. Observatories around the world reported errors in scheduled access windows. Encrypted messages circulated quietly among astronomers. Something was happening, and institutions did not want the public watching. But the more the agencies went silent, the louder independent observers became. Groups like the Abero Tracker Collective in Spain and Bill Gray's Distributed Telescope Network mobilized globally. They synced backyard telescopes, university observatories, and even repurposed satellite feeds to capture fragments of data. Pieced together, the fragments formed a horrifying picture. Atlas wasn't drifting. It was maneuvering. Swan wasn't wandering. It was steering. And the two objects were moving as if they were pieces of the same system. Their thrust bursts were synchronized. Their tail pulses followed the same rhythm. Their alignments matched orbital corridors used by spacecraft for slingshots and rendezvous. And then came the detail no one wanted to consider: Swan's orbital period, 22,554 years, a cycle that placed its last appearance in Earth's night sky near the end of the last ice age suddenly. Ancient archaeology gained new weight. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the world's oldest sanctuary, a stone pillar carved 12,000 years ago displays a pattern of symbols some researchers believe represent a long-period comet spirals. Animal forms, a celestial visitor carved into stone long before history began. If Swan had passed near Earth before, then ancient humans might have seen a fortress blazing across the heavens, immortalizing it in myths and warnings. Theories that once sounded ridiculous now gained traction. What if Swan had been here before? What if it passed through the solar system in cycles measured not in centuries, but in tens of thousands of years? What if its appearance was not random, but scheduled? And what if Atlas and Swan returning together wasn't coincidence at all, but the activation of a long-dormant cycle? As scientists debated, secret operations were already unfolding. A classified probe, launched quietly from a covert orbital platform, was sent to intercept Swan. It never reached its destination. At just over 1 million kilometers out, the feed cut abruptly, not due to instrument failure, but due to something else. The final frame the probe transmitted was a shock, Its own reflection mirrored back at it like a fractal echo. Seconds later, the signal collapsed. Engineers examining the data found evidence of an energy wall, a lattice-like field similar to a Faraday cage. A shield not only capable of blocking signals, but of actively repelling intrusions. Swan wasn't just massive, it was defended. It was aware. And as the blackout deepened and new pulses rippled through the void, one truth became impossible to ignore. Atlas might be a scout, but Swan was something far greater. And now, both were inside our solar system. As the blackout window deepened and the world's major agencies continued to restrict information, independent astronomers kept their eyes locked on the sky. They were the first to notice something extraordinary. Swan wasn't just reflecting sunlight, it was emitting a frequency band almost silent in nature, somewhere between soft X-rays and gamma radiation. No comet, asteroid, or interstellar rock produces structured signals in that range. Yet Swan pulsed with absolute precision, the bursts clean enough to overload the sensors on smaller ground-based telescopes. In one Australian observatory, an entire prototype array went blind for 30 seconds when pointed at Swan engineers couldn't explain the failure. But one phrase kept reappearing in their private messages: deliberate jamming. Even the most conservative astronomers began whispering the same unsettling idea. Swan was not just big, it was not just bright, it was interacting with our instruments as if it knew it was being watched. If Oumuamua was subtle and evasive, Swan was its opposite: loud, commanding, and overwhelming. It bent not only its environment, but our ability to observe it. Then came the signal that changed everything. Amateur satellite trackers picked up a structured burst of energy originating from Swan, not directed at Earth, not aimed into deep space, but pointed at the moon. The wave packet wasn't chaotic. It was layered with variations in amplitude, polarization, and harmonic structure that resembled executable code more than language cryptographers and mathematicians scrambled to decipher it. But the most shocking revelation came from NASA's Deep Space Network. The transmission was aimed precisely at a cluster of lunar mascons, regions of abnormally dense mass beneath the moon's crust. Geological maps have shown these gravitational anomalies for decades, but their origin has remained a mystery. If Swan was transmitting an encoded sequence into those mascons, the implications were terrifying. What if the moon wasn't just a dead satellite? What if something hidden beneath its surface had been dormant for thousands of years, waiting for the right trigger? And what if Swan, the fortress, the beacon, had just activated it? As the lunar signal continued, Earth itself began to respond in ways no one expected. Magnetometers across the planet registered synchronous pulses every 43 seconds, perfectly matching Swan's emission cycles. These pulses propagated through the Earth's magnetic field like ripples in a pond. At the same time, seismographs in South America, Antarctica, and Asia recorded ultra-low frequency vibrations. No tectonic model could explain migratory animals, whales, birds, insects, began shifting their navigation patterns in unison, as if responding to an invisible compass that had suddenly changed. It was as though Earth's magnetic memory, written into the planet's ancient past, had been stirred awake. Scientists argued endlessly. Some claimed these phenomena were coincidences amplified by fear. Others pointed to solar activity or atmospheric interference. But those who had been following Swan and Atlas from the beginning realized the truth. This was no longer a cosmic event happening far above our heads. It had reached us. It was inside our instruments, inside our planet's magnetic field, inside the biological instincts of creatures that evolved long before humanity existed. And then came the theory that changed the tone of every closed-door meeting. What if Oumuamua, the first strange visitor in 2017, was the lock? A silent probe sent ahead to check if humanity was capable of noticing a test of our technological maturity. And what if 3I/ATLAS, smaller and more agile, was the scanning key? A drone sent to collect data, map the environment, and report back if so. Then Swan, 100 times larger, shielded, echoing ancient orbital cycles, was something else entirely. The fortress wasn't a metaphor, it was a role. Supporting that idea was one final disturbing coincidence. During one of Swan's strongest emission events, both Voyager spacecraft, launched in the 1970s and floating billions of kilometers away, briefly broke protocol. They transmitted bursts of data unprompted, containing structures analysts have yet to decode, as if some dormant subroutine inside them had recognized a signal, as if something built long before Swan's arrival had just been reactivated. The universe is not subtle. It writes its messages in patterns, cycles, and harmonics, and the closer scientists looked, the clearer the pattern appeared. Swan's orbital period was 22,554 years. Its last passage through the inner solar system occurred near the end of the last ice age, when human civilization was just beginning to form. Ancient sites like Göbekli Tepe, with their ringed stone pillars and carvings of celestial events, suddenly seemed less like myth and more like memory. A cycle, a return, a signal embedded in time itself. Whatever Swan and Atlas represented, they were not new visitors, they were returning ones. Still, even this revelation did not prepare anyone for what happened next. Another burst of radiation emerged from Swan, stronger, clearer, more structured than anything before. It carried multiple harmonics interwoven through a single pulse, like chords struck simultaneously on an instrument the size of a world. When decrypted through spectral analysis, the signal produced a fractal pattern, spirals interlocking with spirals, forming a structure that resembled both a neural network and a stellar map. Some believed it was a message. Others believed it was a command. One thing was certain: it was not noise. Moments after the signal arrived, a wave of resonance swept through Earth's magnetosphere, stronger than any previously recorded power grids flickered. Deep ocean sensors shut down. Several satellites rebooted simultaneously, and then, in a moment that chilled every scientist involved, the lunar mascons pulsed back. Not randomly, but in perfect rhythm with Swan's last transmission, as if responding. Humanity had always believed the moon to be silent, but silence is not the same as absence. The James Webb Telescope, still straining to capture data in the aftermath, detected a faint but measurable luminescence in the region around Swan. Not reflected sunlight, not thermal radiation, something else, something active, something that looked like an enormous object shifting its energy state. And then, slowly, Swan's massive tail began to brighten again. The fortress had not left. It had only completed its first task. By now, the story had outgrown astronomy. It had moved beyond physics, beyond planetary science, into something older and more fundamental. Swan and Atlas were not behaving like cosmic debris. They were behaving like components of a larger system, a mission, a cycle that humanity had unintentionally interrupted simply by observing it, a sequence that might have been running for tens of thousands of years. The final realization was the most unsettling of all. The moment humanity looked up with instruments powerful enough to notice, the cycle resumed. Not because we discovered Swan, but because Swan discovered that we were finally capable of seeing it. And now, as the signals continue, as the moon responds, and as the magnetic resonance of Earth falls into rhythm with an object older than civilization itself, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. We were never the observers in this story. We were the observed. Whatever Swan and Atlas represent, whatever mission they belong to, whatever cycle they are part of, it has already begun. And whether Earth is a waypoint, a data node, or something far more significant, one thing is clear: the universe is no longer silent, it is answering back.